All right, I think let's get started. We are recording, so this will be available later to anyone who's missing out. Hello, I'm Jeremy Johnson, the Vice President of Customer Experience for projekt202. Today, we're happy to present this experience-driven leadership webinar, accelerating innovation during rapid change. This session is focused on technology, which is what every great experience is built on. We have some great leaders of engineering and tech to discuss this topic and answer your questions. If this is your first webinar with us, I just want to make sure you're aware. We love questions from you, the audience, so please don't be shy. If you're using Zoom for the first time, which I know is probably not likely at this point in the pandemic, but there is a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, so just below there. This is where you can ask and upvote questions that our moderator will be using during the panel. So to kick things off, I'm going to introduce you to our moderator, Nathan Smith, who has a long history working in technology and is currently the Director of Technology out of the projekt202 Seattle office. With that, Nathan, take it away.
Excellent. Thanks, Jeremy. So before we dive into some of the conversation, I'd like to just take a few moments to set up some context. And if we go to the next slide. Over the last 6 months of the pandemic, we've seen a lot of trends that were already in motion begin to greatly accelerate. And one of the most obvious examples is online retail. Over the last 20 years, e-commerce had been growing at a fairly predictable, fairly steady rate. But beginning in March, that curve changed radically and dramatically and very suddenly. We've seen as much growth in the online retail sector in the last 3 months as we had in the previous 3 years. And this trend doesn't show any sign of reverting. All the customer surveys that we've done indicate that the behavior changes introduced as a result of the pandemic are going to become permanent. But another example that's pretty obvious to us all are workplace trends. Before COVID, roughly 1/3 of all US employees were working from home. And that percentage has doubled during the course of the pandemic. I think many of us thought that remote work was impossible up until the very moment where it became absolutely necessary. And like online retail, I think this trend is going to become permanent too. Half of employees say that they would prefer to work from home permanently. And about half of all employers say that this is going to permanently change their work from home policies. Change is hard, and there's often lots of obstacles that stand in the way that we need to overcome. But crisis is a crucible, and we've seen lots of these barriers start to fall away over the last 6 months. Nearly all enterprises believe that their digital transformation programs have accelerated during COVID, and about half of them have added entirely new channels for servicing their customers. About 80% of organizations have increased their budgets for digital transformation, and getting executive buy-in and stakeholder approval for this type of change has become easier than ever. And if we go to the next slide, we're at sort of a good inflection point now. We've made the changes that we need to adapt to the current normal, and we've got a bit of an opportunity now to pause, to take a step back, and to begin thinking a little bit more strategically about how we can use technology as a catalyst and an enabler to really drive longer term sustainable innovation, right? How we can take advantage of the opportunity that we're presented with. And so with that context in mind, I think I'd like to introduce our panelists. We're very lucky to have two very distinguished engineers with us here today. First is Ryan Broles. Ryan, do you want to take a moment and introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Nathan. Hi, Ryan Broles. I'm currently the VP Engineering at NUC. We are a real estate technology startup focused on our new home swap, which effectively, through a lot of our technology, is helping customers move into their new home without having to worry about all the added stress, pain, and now, of course, the people milling about your home, all the stress that is associated with selling your old home. We have a digital technology platform that helps enable that, as well as data science and algorithms that help us really get to really highly accurate sort of home valuation and market trends and things like that. My background has been almost exclusively in mobile tech. I started at Apple back in the day, but after leaving there, sort of left the engineering team there to start a bunch of mobile technology startups. Eventually, over the course of a decade, that led me to a end-to-end mobile design development product studio, and then on to the digital teams at Starbucks, where I led the mobile teams and later into the technology innovation space there before coming here to Knock.
Fantastic.
It's great to join.
Excellent. Thanks for joining. We've also got Brandon Elliott from Leafly. Brandon.
Hey, I've been a digital technology executive now for probably about 20 years. I've been fortunate in my career that I really gravitated towards technology and e-commerce many, many years ago. And I think it was a good, lucky choice. So I've worked with a lot of small brands and some big brands like H-E-B, Eddie Bauer, Lululemon, and now Leafly. Amazing opportunity. I joined about a year ago because Leafly is the largest place to discover, find, and buy cannabis. And I just think that, you know, it's a tremendous opportunity for that industry, but that because of legalization is lagging with the ability to even process credit cards, for example, not possible in the United States yet for online purchases. So being able to kind of apply some of that e-com background and experience using the technology and the 10 years of history at Leafly, I'm just so excited. So thank you for having me today.
No, we're glad to. Thank you for joining. So I think to sort of get things kicked off, I think all of us have had to be a little bit flexible over the last 6 months. And I'm curious to know sort of how your team's priorities have shifted and, you know, how have you guys pivoted, right, in order to support the changing needs that are facing your organizations? And Ryan, you want to kick off first?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think crisis has always been sort of a focusing element in my mind. And I think, you know, I know, and actually the stats you just shared, I think really underscore that during times of great change is really the time to focus. And we've done exactly that. So we're lucky to say that coming out of this pandemic, we've actually undergone sort of a fairly major pivot from a fully owned and operated business where we were running all of our transactions with our own internal agents and internal staff to one that's really enabling our partner brokerages and agents out there. So we've taken the gem that we created with our product and have really opened it up to other agents and brokers and everything. And so it's not only helping us scale what we know is a really good product, but it's providing a new value add kind of service for all the real estate agents out there that have been really impacted by this. I don't think that if we hadn't been hit by COVID and we hadn't been hit by sort of the major changes across the industry that we're operating in, it wouldn't have had the same sort of accelerated effect. Basically, as soon as things started to lock down and we started to see some of our markets really drop in numbers, it became this moment of like, we believe in this and we're going to double down on it and focus our company exclusively on launching that. And here we are a number of months later having launched it. So it was definitely a focusing element.
Fantastic. Brandon, your industry, there's a lot of pressures facing the industry and there's a lot of change that I think happens all the time. How has COVID affected sort of your operations?
Yeah, it's been really interesting. I mean, our industry is very hyper local right now. And if you look at sort of Canada, which has national legalization, we can process credit cards in Canada, and in the US, it's cash. They're very, opposite of one another. Our Canadian customers immediately gravitated towards let me pay with a credit card online, which seems normal to people who are in the e-commerce industry, but it's not in cannabis because it's just kind of lagging and getting there, right? And so we had a sudden surge, as you might expect, for curbside pickup, for online ordering with credit cards. And some of the small things, I'll give you one example that is now taken for granted is we all know in online sales and local sales, taxing is just ridiculously complicated. I mean, one of the companies I work for, a $26 billion grocery store in Texas, it was down to the store was so large that it split 2 county lines and half the registers got one tax rate and half got the other. So if you can imagine scenarios like that and then tack on additional taxes, right? For just because of its cannabis. It gets very complex very quickly. And then you realize that there aren't any third-party providers or notable third-party providers yet. There's an opportunity here if anybody's listening to create a tax service for cannabis, right? You can go subscribe as an online retailer to a tax service. You can give them your product code and they'll come back and say, tax is 8.25%. That's what you charge the customer, and we'll help you reconcile your taxes at the end of the year. In cannabis, there really isn't such a thing. There's a series of taxes. And so we want to process credit cards, and yet we don't actually know what the tax rates are, right? The way it works today is we help you facilitate a transaction. We don't technically sell anything on leafly.com. We can't. And so we send the order to the store, and there's a really good chance you would go get it. Now you've got those same customers going, okay, we actually want to buy it online now. You're like, well, we can't tax for it yet. We're not sure what the rate is. Can we just give you back like 30 cents if we're wrong? If you rewind 15, 20 years ago, it's the same challenges the industry was having generally when we went online. And so, some of our priorities, I was talking to a friend yesterday, who's the founder and CEO of a company in Chicago and not in cannabis industry, but same thing. It's in a lot of ways, we went back to the basics at this point. We're going, okay, we were working on this trajectory because, the economy was going this way, customers' demand and sentiment was this way. All of a sudden, the customer sentiment completely shifts, as we all know. You kind of have to, it's forced. And as a result, we need to get back to the basics in many cases and get tax and order processing running quickly and get it accurate and just some of the basics. And so I think that was the biggest outcome for us is trying to get back to some of those basics and figure out those mechanics. And we're still heading towards legalization. We're still very, very excited about that. Maybe one could argue this might speed it up. Tax revenue is important right now. As a result of, if it gets legal, you can see all these industries that are going to pop up. You have to have tax service providers. You have to have accounting. You have to have all these things that really aren't available in our sector right now. So it's been a pretty cool ride for us lately.
It's interesting, right? A lot of our retail and commerce clients, are increasingly sort of charging towards, increased adoption of contactless payment. And that does not work in a cash-based business. How has technology, how has your use of technology changed over the last 6 months? Are there specific new technologies that you've introduced or changes that you've made that have helped that you think may, continue to, either be enablers in the short term or stick around for the longer term?
I'll tell you, for us, so we're a remote first company, so it's kind of interesting. The natural assumption has been, we were unaffected, and I think we'll talk a little bit about sort of the internal, how things got done during the pandemic. But from a technology perspective, our internal operations have actually not changed too much from a technology standpoint. But externally, the real estate business being so person to person and so about the human in the house with the other human, and kind of talking about the house, home tours, home assessments, things like that, all of that came to a grinding halt. And so what we have seen a lot more of our investment going into is into the technology that helps us do home assessments from remote, helps the agents do virtual tours a lot more. I think you're seeing a lot more of the virtual tours, and I think Redfin and Zillow, you've even seen them do a lot more of that, really front facing on their websites, for example. We've put a lot more into whatever it takes for our internal teams and our customers to be able to facilitate this transaction completely remotely, because no one wants to let anyone in their house right now.
Nice.
Just to echo what Ryan was saying there, we've leaned into, we've had a lot of demand from our dispensary partners. We've got over 3,000 partners out there in dispensaries, or what we call basically storefronts, right? And they're asking for new technology, new help with, skip staying in the line, because you don't want to stay in the line, a really crowded store with 50 people. You want to get in, you want to get out really quickly. And so online pickup has been even more of a hit than it was already trending for. We can't do curbside pickup, but we can get people in the store and they can pick up the order. So it's been a lot of help and really getting our partners and helping them honestly deal with their new local reality. We mentioned Canada Payments already, and then something that was really interesting for us is an oldie but a goodie. We do SMS for transactional order notifications. Your pickup's ready, or you want to talk to your bud tender. And maybe you're out of stock on this, but you want a substitution or you want a recommendation, something like that. And we've actually seen our SMS traffic spike 230% since the beginning. And so we're doing well over 7 million texts a month now, basically to help facilitate an order. So just tremendous volume and people trying to kind of connect using really an old technology, but still it's very predominant. So it's very popular right now.
Fantastic. So Ryan, I think you started to sort of touch on this topic, right? Your internal teams and your, how has technology helped your companies, just continue daily operations, right? As we're all working from home, as we're all sort of trying to do social distancing, how has that been sort of an enabler? How has that not worked out, right? Where do we think that there's opportunities for technology to make that process even better and even more seamless?
Yeah, it's a great question. Again, being remote first, a lot of this stuff had been practiced. So in some ways we found ourselves almost coaching some of our former colleagues or friends on some of the best practices around remote work, but we also discovered plenty of pitfalls even within ourselves. So, we within our sort of internal teams, we're really heavily reliant on Slack. And we also have a bunch of internal tools that sort of help all of our internal operational and technology teams stay better connected and stay aware of the status of the transactions and things like that. Zoom obviously has been sort of our core video platform, but I'm not sure where he coined it from, but our CEO Sean likes to talk about the PTZD, the post-traumatic Zoom disorder. We have definitely found that even as a company which has basically been founded and run on video platforms, that even we are exhausted and we're tired of staring at our screens and our cameras just all day long, because there's something about the choosing to work from home and then sort of being forced to work from home, right, which just has created this sort of cultural stress. And I think so more than the technology itself being a limiter or anything like that, I think that's the most important thing we've learned, is to give people space and to really acknowledge these are ridiculously hard times, and to for example, I know that we have people on our teams whose kids are going back to school, and some of their schools are doing the thing of we'll just replicate the classroom and we're going to spend 8 hours a day on Zoom and stuff like that. It's really rough to do that. So I guess our biggest learning has been to give people space and acknowledge that things are hard, to make sure that they're not spending all the time on the camera. In fact, we've gone through a whole culling of a bunch of meetings and things like that just to keep people feeling a little more human. Slack, we've tried to really be very diligent with the channels that we have. I think we had a big growth in the number of channels, and then of course it's just completely scattered as to where you might find information. So we've tried to really focus and make sure that people are only in the channels that they find relevant. We've added a bunch of cultural channels though, so that's been pretty cool. We have ones for food and gardening and pets and all this other kind of stuff it's kind of just helped it stay more human even while we all been in quarantine.
Fantastic. Brandon, same question for you. How has your team changed, right, during the and the work methods for your engineering staff changed during the course of the pandemic?
Yeah, we've done the same thing, right? We've had a lot of cultural channels pop up as well, and so that's been interesting to see. Dogs, and same thing Ryan was saying. I say one challenge that we definitely still have is the video conferencing is still remarkably hard. You think everybody would be masters at it by now, and the ones that seem to be doing the best are my 11 and 7-year-old. So I'm not sure what that's saying about me or others, but they seem to have nailed it. I walked in the room last night. I just got them headsets, which of course took 3 weeks to come in now. And they're in their respective rooms, video conferencing each other. I think our senior leadership team took a little bit longer to adapt to the technology. We went from the SLT, it was very, in the boardroom, so to speak, even though we don't have a formal boardroom. And we would meet in person a lot and talk. And the first 2-3 weeks of the senior leadership team adapting to using, in our case, Google Hangouts or Google Meet was pretty. I probably shouldn't say this, but it was very entertaining. And I think a lot of people got a kick out of that. But we've all got there. We're starting to figure out conferencing, switching between AirPods and not is difficult. I think something that this sort of is definitely cultural is we've had a really big success with virtual happy hours, which I was initially kind of against. That's just weird, but as time goes on and as one doesn't leave the house, you welcome any opportunity to virtually clank with a friend and share stories about whiskeys. So we do that kind of thing pretty often as well.
Yeah, and I think that's so important. One of my observations has been, all of my Zoom interactions are very transactional, right? We schedule a meeting, the meeting has an agenda, it has a purpose, and there's not a lot of room for serendipity, right? There's not a lot of room for, just those hallway conversations with your team or the engineer where either you connect with them personally or even professionally, just some random topic that leads to a new thing. And I think that the rise of these sort of cultural channels helps with that. Virtual happy hours help, right? Ryan, it sounds like are there other techniques that you found for trying to create that serendipity?
No, honestly, I think you said it. It's like it's creating the space for it, and whether that's topics of interest or whether like we've had game nights and things like that. It's just non-required. Like, hey, drop in if you want. We're gonna do like Pictionary. We're gonna do trivia games or something like that. One of my managers created like a Jeopardy channel where you can like it's like literally a feed of Jeopardy questions and stuff like that. So you're kind of learning trivia together. Some of these things sound really silly, but it's the replication of those hallway conversations that are now missing. It reminded me of this other thing too, which is I know that a lot of my peers in the industry are struggling with the people management side, which is you used to have one-on-ones with your manager and work on your career development and everything like that. And over Zoom, it's turned that into less of a growing of the person and more of this like transactional meeting kind of thing, which is a real limiter. So, I mean, we really, again, we try to, all of our managers are really focused on making sure to connect with the human and how they're doing in this time. But we also have tools like 15.5 that it helps run one-on-ones and some of our professional development and coaching sort of within a tool that it kind of helps us to remind ourselves to focus on some of the more the human elements of people leadership.
Yeah, on that note, my one-on-ones just have no specific agenda, but I've definitely turned those more into, and I've seen other managers and leaders do the same thing. Some of them are, it's just nice to have occasionally a one-on-one or just a chat that is like you leaving the office at the end of the day and going to have a drink together and just talking about life. And so I've actually been like, some of my best conversations lately have just been, let's not talk about work at all. We even go as far, and it sounds kind of silly, but like we'll even like go walk around our respective neighborhoods and just talk on the phone, maybe turn on our video chat and kind of laugh at somebody doing something. There's usually 15 people all trying to steer to one side of the road or the other. Just some way to connect. And in the same way, I personally got a little bit bad about kind of sticking to the Slack, the rooms and the threads. And I kind of reminded myself to go out occasionally and just randomly ping people like, how are you doing? Kind of one-on-one. And I know when people ping me now, it's like, where have you been? I feel like I haven't seen you, talked to you, because I haven't in a while, but just that random interaction one-on-one is still, you're trying to, I guess you end up sort of not intentionally, but basically replicating the office where you bump into each other when you're going down the hall. And again, not intentional, but it's amazing how much those things mean to people.
Absolutely. That idea of that virtual walk is brilliant, and I am absolutely going to steal that. Our Pictionary channel is amazing, and one of the things I've learned during the pandemic is that our president is a Pictionary savant. Totally unexpected. I was not expecting to learn that.
I've definitely had more gut laughter during the Pictionary sessions than just about any other time during this whole pandemic.
I think that's a good segue into, are there new behaviors that your teams, right, and the engineers on your teams have adopted? Are there new muscles that you've seen them starting to grow or stretch? How have the engineers that work for you, how have they grown, right, in their professional capacity?
Yeah, one for us is we've been reasonably good at having localized conversations. So we've got 3 offices in 3 different cities, and the respective offices communicate really well. But the muscle that we've extended is communicating intra-office. And so, or between us. And so, like one example is decision logs. When we have a reasonably impactful technology or product decision that we need to make, it used to be that, not exclusively, but for the most part, we'd kind of shop it around a little bit, talk about it. We may write a little confidence page up or Google Doc and kind of pitch it, whatever. But it's gone to a whole new level now. I'm not sure if it's 100% for the good or bad, but there's definitely some strong positive takeaways. And one example is if it's an extremely impactful decision we need to make, we take the time now, whoever's leading the charge on this effort or, has the highest degree of accountability, we'll put like, here's why we need to make this choice. Here's what I propose. It's technology X. The benefits are going to be, Y. And then we've asked everybody to come up with 2 or 3 alternatives, either in-house alternatives and or build versus buy, where maybe you buy, and by buy, I mean open source too, right? Again, none of that's new, just the act of writing them down side by side in a page, and then giving everybody a chance to weigh in on the thread over several days versus, maybe as hours before. It allows for more conversation from people who normally maybe their mode of working is to go off and sort of just put their head down and then react the next morning. Maybe their morning time is that cycle. And so now we're getting more input from other team members who wouldn't normally necessarily have weighed in. We're alerting it, on Slack. There's a decision thread out there, a decision log. There's an automated reminder. There's a bot that goes off now to remind you to vote in a way. We set a date, and then we come together and there's a winner, and then we pick the outcome. And I think it's brought together a lot of people. Again, some of those aspects is just, it's slowing down enough in a weird way that we've been able to grab the introverts more and kind of get their thoughts on paper, so to speak, because maybe they wouldn't have spoke up in a meeting before, or maybe they wouldn't have stood up and talked about it, but they were definitely willing to write their opinions and maybe even do a POC for us. So it's been really cool to see different personalities kind of take different levels within the company now, and it's really encouraging, I think.
That's great. Like, I think technology at its worst is when it amplifies the loudest voices, and I think finding opportunities to be more inclusive, and I think the asynchronous nature of a lot of the communication that we're doing now, I think can be great. That's fantastic. Ryan, how about your teams? How have your teams grown or sort of began to operate in different ways?
I mean, again, being sort of remote in our whole history, I mean, I think the majority of our processes and tools have not changed fundamentally. I think maybe where we've seen the most change is among the senior leadership team, where we're now, especially because we're so mindful about sort of everyone's mental state and everything, we're doing a lot more using our tools, using our whether it's some of our like internal ENPS surveys, or whether it's these 15 fives that I talked about, where we're able to do sort of like pulse surveys of our teams. Like, it's really using the tools at our disposal just to make sure that we are doubling down on checking in with the team and things like that. But from an overall methodology and sort of just the way that we generally produce the work that we produce, it hasn't changed fundamentally.
Excellent. I'm going to start taking some questions from the channel, from the Q&A channel. Just a reminder to folks attending that we've got a ability to submit questions through Q&A, and they'll pop up here, and we're going to try and harvest those. So the first question, and I think it's related to what we've been talking about in that team space, is have you seen the quality or the velocity of engineering work accelerate or decelerate during COVID?
On our side, I'll just say, and it's because of the focusing element of the pandemic, because we shaved off so many other distractions. I think velocity has definitely increased. I mean, the sheer element of saying like, this stuff is no longer as relevant, everyone is focused on this new track, has really sort of helped just increase engagement and velocity and delivery over the last few months.
Ours is kind of come in waves. At first, as I'm sure many, it was a new reality and everybody kind of slowed down. And then we realized we're not commuting anymore, and we're pretty focused on our roadmap. And then we accelerated dramatically. We got a lot of features pumped out ahead of schedule. And we're excited about that. And then we saw this fatigue set in, which you wouldn't expect, because product design, engineering in particular, that we're closest with, kind of used to working from home as needed, a couple of days a week, not a big deal. But just being stuck at home it started to wear on people. And we actually started to, at least qualitatively, see a slowdown in productivity, or a differential in maybe quality. And obviously a lot of verbatim feedback, kind of through one-on-ones and managers, and just polls are running internally to check on people. How are you doing? It started to trend a little negative, as a lot of people have right now, is what we found out. And so we instituted, no meeting Wednesdays, an oldie but a goodie. But it really helped in this remote situation, because it's like, we're really trying to stay off Slack. We're really trying not to, the SLT in particular is trying not to bring anybody into meetings or ask any crazy questions, like hold the questions if not emergency till Thursday. And the teams responded incredibly positively, because it allows them to kind of get in one mindset and not have to context switch for a day. And it's phenomenal, because there's a lot of context switching in remote, is what we've found. And then Fridays, we actually have instituted every other Fridays off. They were originally summer Fridays, just to kind of give people a breather. And now they're, Corona Fridays, I think we're calling them. We're probably a poor name, but we went with it. So, it's helped. And so honestly, my initial response was like, we're a startup, we got to work a lot. And, are we going to be at a disadvantage? And I was wrong on this one. Like it's been tremendously positive. The teams, when they hit it hard. They're energetic. We had a hackathon today, and everybody for 2 hours was just hackathon demo. We've been working on this whole week, and they were rolling and with the punches and just laughing and having a good time together. And we had some genuinely amazing, actually implementable, not like, that looks great in a year, but like, we can implement this. This is fantastic. And so we have a lot of creativity come out from the teams, and new ways of thinking. And I would credit some of that to just giving people a little space to decompress. We're trying to pick a day where everybody has permission to be off. Nobody should feel guilty. That way there's no pinging going on. I mean, we're across 3 time zones. So we looked at the half day offs, and it was like, well, whose half day is that? If you're on the East Coast and you start on the West Coast, did we get anything really done? And then we went with a full day off every other, and it's been tremendously rewarding. And I would say now, very confidently, I would say our productivity has actually increased despite having every Fridays off. We're really happy. I do think that at this point, if we were to terminate every other Fridays off, given where we're at right now, I don't know that we would see an uptick in throughput, to be honest. So I think we're hitting our stride now.
Yeah, that's something I've heard a lot, is that I think a lot of engineers feel like their productivity and efficiency has increased, but the risk of burnout has also increased. And I think some of the steps that you've talked about, I think, do well towards sort of mitigating that. In fact, I think I read something from a LinkedIn executive earlier today who said, "I'm not working from home; I'm living at work." And I think trying to avoid that situation is important.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people building pools at work right now. Then
nice. I think that's a segue into coming out of the teams portion of it a little bit. Like, one of the things that we've been very focused on in a technology arena for a long time has been sort of business continuity and disaster recovery, right? And how do we create sort of sustainable businesses and technology infrastructure, right, that can survive the unexpected? Have either of you learned anything from this time that changes the way that you think about resiliency or business continuity, that might be lessons that we can apply going forward?
The thing I'll say that we've learned is to make sure that we're supporting meeting our customers and our agents where they want to meet us. I think I think early on, especially in this pivot that we were doing, we had that clear vision for like how an agent was going to interact with us and how a customer was going to interact with us, right? And then as the entire industry was completely changed and completely uprooted, and the underlying systems of the real estate industry were changing just as dynamically as everyone else, suddenly we were finding that our customers and our agents were wanting to like meet us through different forums, different channels. Maybe it's a different way of communicating with their internal representative. Maybe it was just the actual sort of real estate transaction between the agent and the customer was changing. So we had to really expand the flexibility and extensibility of our experiences to make sure that no matter how a customer or agent was coming into our door, that we could support them and help them through the transaction. So flexibility became a pretty big one, and quick adaptation.
I would say a lot changed on our end. I mean, we're a pretty remote company just because of, the multiple offices and kind of, 60% of our 140 plus people are engineering, product, or design. So sort of status quo, but I think something that was interesting to us is one, as a startup, don't go supersize on your office. Things could change. So we've had some navigating there and some really good opportunities to cut some costs and keep everybody super happy. And I think the other ones are vendors. We feel like we like to fight for the underdogs, to be honest. The underdogs, I'm not going to say we won't use large technology vendors. We certainly do, but we love the underdogs. And so we've had to be a little more cautious during these, times. Some of the vendors are struggling a little bit. And so we've had to kind of be careful of remind ourselves, like, you need a backup plan. If it's super critical, you should have a couple vendors or something lined up as a backup plan. And so we've been caught off guard at least once from one of our vendors that threw us a curveball that we don't think would have happened had it not been for COVID. So, I don't think that's anything new, but just given the economy, we weren't expecting it. And so just a reminder to self, like, have backup plans, have a continuity plan. Those things are kind of boring, but they're very important, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so the greater diversity in your vendor ecosystem.
Yeah.
I think that's a great point. I'm going to take another question here from the QA channel. Do you feel like the acceleration of digital is going to grow technology budgets, right? Do you think the investment that your companies have made in technology historically is going to increase going forward?
No question. I mean, I think from our perspective, like, this has just further reinforced how much we need to focus on things like automation and on streamlining the transactions using tech. And as I talk to some of my old colleagues and peers, I mean, I think that's been fairly universal, that there's maybe some of the innovation that was really boiling under the surface a little bit, and maybe had a hard time getting jump started, is now seeing some serious effort and money being poured into it, just because again, innovation is what gets your company through crisis. So I definitely think so.
Agreed. I can't see a future where technology doesn't continue to play a major part of what we do, especially given how much of the world now, who maybe wasn't super heavy in technology before, is now adapted to it as well. So it's really increased adoption across the board. I've seen examples where, I know people personally in my family who really never would have used video conferencing, and they're all about it now. And it's been really exciting. And we're seeing a demand, obviously, in our customer base as well. And, I think we're hoping that this maybe spurs some legal changes or breaks down a few barriers to allow us to deploy some of the technology that maybe many take for granted. And so in a roundabout way, what this has been is it's given us data points now to say, like, when you let us use this thing temporarily because of what the situation going on right now, we were able to actually prove that there is a customer demand. This changes it. And by the way, you get more tax money as a result, Mr. State or Miss State, right? And so I think we can take a lot of those data points coming out of this and probably get more permission to deploy those. Customers want it. States are happy with the income it's providing from their balance sheets. So we're really excited to be able to kind of take a really bad situation, a bad year, and get some proof points and data points out of it that we can definitely lean into heavy in 2021.
Brandon, I think you would echo this. I think we're both in industries that also have a lot of entrenched sort of civic policy and a lot of, like, what I'll call kind of the government building that must be visited in order to sort of facilitate your business. Yeah, and we've seen major upheavals in innovation, even within that sort of civic space. Like, when all of our state licensures, for example, like, are all at home and not able to go into the office, like, they were completely relearning how to do their job. And it actually, in some cases, opened up some new streamlined methods of interacting with our state and local jurisdictions. So that gives me a lot of hope about the future, just in general, for all of this kind of civic tech as well.
I agree, Ryan. It's definitely been a forcing function.
Yeah, that's actually a pivot into kind of a broader question, right? Um, in addition to the pandemic that we've been dealing with, this is also a time of some social transformation, right? And um, how can technology and the work that we do as technologists, be a catalyst, right, for positive change, in our civic governments, in our communities? Uh, any thoughts on that?
I'll just say, like, I think transparency in general is the biggest thing that we can reveal with technology. Like, I think especially when it comes to sort of the civic space and some of these broader social issues, like information sources can be limited and often disempowering for an individual to make really some of these important decisions about their life. And so I just think the more information that can be the more concrete and real information that can be shared with, with all these individual humans that are going through this, the better equipped they'll be to make decisions. And like, I hope to see that trend continuing. What had already started with, with Twitter and communication, real-time communication like that is now expanding again into things like civic tech and into, even sort of new media sources. And I just think the more we can really focus on that, the more empowered we can make people.
I would echo that. Transparency is key. And I think there's a lot that happens when you openly and willingly share information. It's been really fun to watch how much it's empowered small businesses, especially here. I mean, Texas is where I live, but these smaller businesses, maybe they were cash only, like super famous barbecue place, cash only, because that's how they've done it for 100 years. And, to see them open up and start to leverage even credit card processing has been a change. But obviously beyond the basics of that is these larger players have the budgets, the R&D budgets to play with new technology and vendors and ways of procurement and ways of interacting with customers. And I feel like a lot of local businesses now have been able to jump on either willingly or unwillingly, but they're jumping on now and gravitating towards the use of technology to connect with their local customers. And so I'm actually excited to see, this is going to sound odd, but even given all the technology that we now have and we will see going forward, I'm seeing a definite trend as to localizing that technology. And I don't mean localization, personalization, yes, of course, but actually applying some of the things that we see online with larger, more entrenched players and making it available on a local basis. And so I feel like in a lot of ways, coming out of this, I think a lot of the playing field is going to be leveled. I think a lot of new startups are going to be born. And I think because of what we've been through, they're going to get permission to operate and scale like maybe they didn't get before all this happened.
Yeah. Which local Austin barbecue place do you want to buzz market?
It's Salt Lick. It is amazing. It's BYOB. So there's a good start right there. And they have a smoke pit when you walk in the restaurant. You can't help but fall in love with barbecue. You could just sit on the bench and smell the barbecue cooking inside. And you may or may not have to actually eat.
I missed South by this year, so I just need to get that sort of barbecue.
Yeah,
remote.
it's a cologne.
Yep. Yeah. Here's another question from the Q&A, and I think it sort of ties to sort of a lot of the discussion we were having about sort of empathy for the customer and sort of understanding what their needs are. So do we think that sort of hyper focus on the challenges for the customer is going to continue after the pandemic, or do we think that we're maybe a little bit more sensitive to it now than we would have been in the past, and maybe we'll revert back to the mean in some sort of way?
May we never lose sight of our customer challenges and driving our businesses off of that. There's no that is the way to run a digital business, is to be always connected to the constantly changing state of your customers, because as this has taught us, like, all of us humans are changing from day to day, and our needs are changing every day. So I hope and will stress that our industry continues to focus on that after this.
I would say the same. We were trending in the right direction. This is an accelerator for us. And we're seeing a bit more open sharing of data between potentially competitive situations before. The data is flowing a little more freely now in the spirit of helping out community that's impacted. So I feel pretty encouraged, at least in our industry, that the spirit of sharing is probably going to continue, and make a meaningful impact.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think I think again, right, the crisis accelerates trends that were already in motion, right? And I think those of us who have been focused on customer experience, right, for the past decade, right, this is just been a focusing lens for that, right, and enable us to really sort of yield the benefits of the work we've done previously, and to try to build on that in a more meaningful way going forward.
Yeah, we have a really strong mission around in our medium and long term, really just empowering the customer in the real estate transaction. Like, I think the real estate industry has come to a place where there are a lot of different players in the transaction, and a lot of that can be really opaque, which makes it very hard to make decisions about who to go with, and like how do I compare these two agents or title companies or whatever it may be. And like, the more information that we can give the customers is helping sort of tear down some of that opaqueness. So I'm super excited for that.
I'm excited for that, Ryan. Keep bringing it. As somebody who just purchased a house, I could have used a lot more of that.
Nice. So, one of the other challenges that I think we've all been facing is sort of how to juggle sort of the tactical and the strategic. In the early days, right, as we were just sort of understanding what this meant, right, we were having to, I think, behave very tactically. Like, what are the changes I need to make today so that my team can work from home tomorrow? What are the changes I need to make today so that my customer can check out, right? As we start to pivot into a more strategic mode, right? Do you face any pressure, right, from folks who are wanting to hold back a little bit, who are wanting to sort of wait to take a little bit more time to sort of see how the trends evolve before making any big bets? How do you have you encountered anyone who said, "Hey, now's not the time that we should invest. Let's wait another 3 months or 6 months and figure things out"? Is that something you've experienced? And if so, how have you dealt with that?
I'll just say internally, I haven't felt beyond what I think was the very practical caution, especially at the beginning of things when it was not at all clear how states and the broader nation was going to respond to the pandemic. I think we had the requisite amount of caution, but in general, no. I think it just goes back to that adaptation and flexibility thing. Like, I think we just made sure to focus on being adaptable, but that it shouldn't at all distract us from our core vision and core strategy. And I think even though things are very uncertain, and I think, and it can be really scary, whether it's for an individual employee or a business as a whole, it can be an extremely scary time. It is not at all the time to slow down or to abandon your strategy. Like, you got to the strategy for a reason, and if those reasons are still sound, then it's time to double down on them.
We pared back some of our initiatives just because, again, people were getting a little fatigued. We're at home, we have more time, let's do more. We learned very quickly that wasn't a good answer, even though it seems like you have more time. And so I would echo what Ryan said. Like, we're actually doubling down so much that we're optimistic about 2021 is one way to maybe say it. And so, we've been around for 10 years. We've got a lot of tech debt. We've had teams come and go. We've had different missions. Couple of years now in a row, 2-3 years, our mission is definitely to create a two-sided marketplace to connect buyers and sellers for cannabis. That's what we do. And so we've had, because of the downtime here, we've had a chance to kind of like back our way out of some of these things. Like, why is that even still around? It's just sitting over in the corner. It's causing outages or downtime every couple of weeks. We actually don't even remember who built it or why. And we've actually allocated specific 20-30% allocation, depending on we have 9 feature teams working on things at any given time, but about a 30%, I would say, and that's really high for us, focus on technical debt. And let's remove all the things that we don't need. Let's take a really concerted effort, keep delivering the new features for the customers, but back down on maybe these 2 or 3 so we can relieve some of our tech debt, with the whole idea of, are we ready to double product design, engineering, and the rest of the company in 2021. If we can't very clearly delineate these APIs can be split, now you've got two teams. It used to be one big team, right? We've got a team working on quotes, orders, checkout, delivery, and tax. That's a lot for one team. Even we know that. But again, given our industry is we weren't processing orders, we were just facilitating, right? Well, now that's starting to change. And so the question we've asked ourselves is, are we ready when we hire the next 15 people where we can take half of those responsibilities and create a new team? Are the APIs clean enough? Can we scale that? And if the answer is no, then we actually start working on that investment of let's get ready to scale and make this team, we'll basically double down on this team. And so we've taken a lot of time very intentionally to focus on adding those things to the roadmap. Previously, they were like, yeah, we're going to work on TechNet, of course. Now they're actually on the roadmap. These are TechNet initiatives that we need to get done this year to get really prepared to hit the gas next year in 2021.
That's fantastic. It's really encouraging to hear that both of your organizations are, continuing to sort of think strategically and sort of prepare yourself for what comes next. For engineering leaders who may be struggling with that, right? Whose leadership may not be, who may be a little bit more gun shy. Is there any advice that you might have for how they can, sell into their management and their leadership, right? The need to continue to invest and to quote unquote double down.
Qualitative information is relatively easy to come by. You can have opinion, you can get kind of votes, and people can say, yeah, if we were to go fix these things, we would actually be able to move much faster. But I would encourage everybody to take some time, not a crazy amount of time, but take some time to try to get some quantitative information. Show some data points, have a proof point. If we were to knock down these 1,000 lines of code, or we were to do that upgrade that we haven't done in a year and a half, and we know we need to do it, we've already got the qualitative information because we've been trying to get it going forever. Put some data there, make an incremental change, measure it. Are you pushing out features faster? Is your, your lighthouse scores, are they faster? Is your page more responsive? If you can incrementally show those data points and show a higher lift in productivity for your teams, maybe they're pushing out code they used to push out 2-3 times a week, now they're pushing out 3-4 times a week. That's real data that you can pull up on the graphs and show where you're pushing that code. Everybody in the company loves to see pushing out more features at a faster clip. And once you can match up the qualitative of, if we do this, we feel like we can push features out faster, and you can get a little bit of permission to do it and then quantitate that and say, now we've actually proven we can do that. Imagine where we could take this if we did a little more debt cleaning. What if we could punch out 5 to 6 features a day? We could just release them whenever we want. Start A/B testing, things that we've wanted to do. If you can put some data points behind that, it's much, much easier to get the buy-in.
Yeah, you bet. I'll just totally echo that. Like, get the data. That goes a long way. And if you are in organizations, which I know this is still a thing, where the digital transformational aspect, like in other words, like pivoting to more of a digital first mindset, is still a struggle. I mean, just go get the market data for how digital engagement has increased during this. I mean, at the end of the day, everything in our world might completely change, but I'm fairly confident the thing that's not going to change is the customers are going to want to reach you through digital channels, and that's got to be the future. That is your way to adapt to anything that comes into the future, in my opinion.
Fantastic. So we're running short on time. I think we're going to take one last question here from the chat. Earlier, Brandon, one of the things that you mentioned, right, was regulations, right, had sometimes been an impediment to some of the things that you wanted to do in some of your growth plan. And you talked about how those are changing and how you envision them continuing to change. Are there other things, technology things, other social things, et cetera, right, that you think might still be, slowing down, right, innovation or growth that still need to change, right, for you to go faster?
Technology, I don't know, funding would be great. We're in a space where there's not national legalization, right? It's state by state, it's pretty local. And so your major institutional backers have a very difficult time putting money into our space. And this is probably hyper local to us, right? Our industry. And so we're definitely seeing movements towards the more national players, the banks, the institutions. They very much want to put money in. And so previously it was this annoying thing on the side. But when you look at the stats and look at the data points and the growth we're seeing, we're doing billions, right? I mean, it's amazing the order volume that we're seeing in the industry. And that opportunity starts to get, because of, the pandemic, our orders doubled in places, right? Of course, everybody's probably did. And we're able to put those data points in front of the credit card processors, and we're able to put those in front of the banks. And the larger, more institutional investors are seeing that, and they're hungry. They're hungry to make an investment. They know there's going to be a breakout soon, and we're starting to see kind of that pull now from the other side, which is really pressure relieving for us. We've been pushing really hard at a local level through our reps and representatives locally, but now we're getting a little bit of pull action. So I don't know if it directly answers your question, but the use and application of technology, given the situation, has allowed us to gather, again, the data points to maybe create some pull efforts. And we're excited to kind of, maybe that'll actually be the breakthrough we're looking for.
Yeah, and I guess for us, I mean, we're with the new change for us, where we're now partnering directly with agents and brokerages and everything like that. I'm excited because for a lot of reasons, but one of those is I think it'll give us the kind of unified voice. Like, we're providing a great value to these agents and brokerages, and then as a unified voice, I think we can help influence some of the, whether it be regulatory or technology changes necessary in the real estate industry to really help all of us move forward a lot faster. So I'm really excited to partner with them on that.
Fantastic. And with that, I think we're out of time. And Ryan and Brandon, I really enjoyed the conversation, and thank you guys so much for joining us.
Yeah, we're almost at the top of the hour. Just wanted to say a quick thank you to everyone for joining today and for all the great questions. If you enjoyed this one, be on the lookout for our next webinar and this kind of evolving experiences series. We'll also be posting these online, as well as we're always looking for feedback to kind of make this better or more tailored directly to you, the audience. So look for those notifications as well. And again, thank you all very much, and we'll see you next time.